Thank you for joining us for Working Through the Word, a ministry of the Richmond Church of Christ. Let's join our pulpit minister, Mike Johnson, as he brings today's lesson.
I don't like the new creation that we had today. Neither morning or night did we stand before the sermon. Neither time. That's my cue to know when I'm about to get up. But changed it today. I don't know if we can do that. I'm not sure that's even right. But oh well. Okay. I had some interesting questions come in. I had 3. We're going to deal with 2 of them. One of them I can't deal with because I don't know how to answer it. I really don't. Maybe you can. Here's the question. Why? That was the question. It was dropped in the box. Somebody said, why? I don't know why. I really don't know. So, sorry, can't answer that. If you forgot the rest of your question, go ahead and put it in. Can't answer that one. But I have 2 that I want to think about, and they have a connection that I think will help us. I want you to turn to Judges. Let's go to the Old Testament, book of Judges, chapter 1. And we're going to flip back and forth between Judges and Joshua for a little bit and think with me. I love it when people ask questions about verses or phrases or things that we might overlook, and someone catches it and it causes the question. And so I like this one. The question is, why could God not defeat the enemy that had iron chariots? Chapter 1, verse 19. So the Lord was with Judah, and they drove out the mountaineers, but they could not drive out the inhabitants of the lowland, because they had chariots of iron. Now, when you read that verse, I get why the question would be asked. Why didn't God do that? Or why couldn't God do that? Let's think for just a minute about the concept that is being addressed here. I want you to go back to Judges chapter 21 for a minute, or Joshua chapter 21. And I want to begin there by noticing a phrase or a couple of verses as we set up, I think, an answer to this question. Joshua 21, starting in verse 43. So the Lord gave to Israel all the land of which he had sworn to give to their fathers, and they took possession of it and dwelt in it. The Lord gave them rest all around according to all that had been sworn to their fathers. And not a man of all their enemies stood against them. The Lord delivered all their enemies into their hand. Not a word failed of any good thing which the Lord had spoken to the house of Israel. All came to pass. Back to Judges chapter 3. And let's notice verse 1. Now these are the nations which the Lord left, that he might test Israel by them, that is, all who had not known any of the wars in Canaan. God fulfilled his promise. No enemy stood against them. When Joshua had gotten to the end of his time. But the text also says that we just read, wait a minute, there are some nations that God did not drive out. In fact, he used them to test his people. Now turn back, if you will, to the book of Joshua again. Let's go to Judges first of all. Go to Judges chapter 11, I believe it is. Let's see here. I think it's Judges 11 that I want to go to here. No, 15. That's where I want to be. That's not right either. Hang on. I'll find my passage here in just a minute, and we will deal with it. Where did I write it down? Somewhere. All right, I'm going to find this passage here in just a minute. Anyway, here's the point I'm trying to make. I'll get to it. God had said, here's what's going to happen. And he gave them the land that he wanted them to have. And the book of Joshua closes at the end of its book, and he's handing out everything to tell the people what their land is going to be. And he divided it up among all of them. And every one of them lived in the land. So, on the one hand, everything that God wanted them to do, they did. He gave them the land. They're living in it. However, there were a lot of nations that did not leave, that were not driven out, that God did not do what he said he was going to do. And so the question has to be, all right, if that's how it is, if God made a promise and he fulfilled it, and yet we turn right around and see that there are nations that are still there, then there must be another kind of problem. There's something else going on that we are missing. We'll go back to Judges chapter, let me see here, it's either Judges 11 or Joshua 11. I think it's Joshua chapter 11. I was flipping through some things this afternoon, checking on it. And in Joshua chapter 11, Joshua tells the people in the northern conquest that they're going to be able to handle the situation. Look at verse 16. Joshua took all the land, the mountain country, all the south, all the land of Goshen, the lowland, and the Jordan plain, the mountains of Israel. Joshua was a great judge or a leader of the people. And in doing so, he was able to help them conquer the land, but they did not do it fully. So what was the problem? Back in chapter 1, the passage we read from Judges chapter 1, I was doing some reading today and found, of course, I wouldn't have known this, not easy to know in the original language of Hebrew. But if you look at verse 19 and verse 18 together, here is an interesting thing that our English translation seem not to do. Maybe yours does this. We all know that God did not write down chapters and verses. He didn't divide it up. We did it. Humans did it to help us memorize better and find it better. Well, apparently, there is great reason to believe that this verse ought to be divided this way. In verse 18, Judah took Gaza with its territories, Ashkelon with its territory, and Ekron with its territory, so the Lord was with Judah. That's the end of verse 18. Now, verse 19 says, they drove out the mountaineers, but they could not drive out the inhabitants of the lowland because they had chariots of iron. Here is the suggestion. The Lord was with them doing what he did when they were doing what they should do. But there's obviously a problem. For God had said he would do what he would do, but they did not do what he wanted them to do. And since they didn't do it, he did not, in fact, do what they wouldn't do for themselves. And so it appears the only answer to me seems clear that this situation is that the people of God were commanded to go and take the land, and they didn't do it. And in fact, as you read there, when you look at what's going on, what happens back in Judges or Joshua chapter 10 connects with Judges 1 in this situation with Caleb and the upper and the lower springs that he gave to his daughter. It was after the death of Joshua. The book of Judges opens that way. After the death of Joshua, the people asked, what can we do? How are we going to take this land? And God said to Judah, verse 1 and 2, take Judah and go up and take the land. Well, God has never been in the habit, if you will. He's never practiced the idea of overcoming what people refuse to do for themselves. Or very often, God does not do what they can do for themselves. There's so many examples of that in Scripture. Maybe one of the clearest when Jesus was standing there at the tomb of Lazarus. Which would be harder? Miraculously to move the stone or to bring Lazarus back from the dead? Well, miraculously, they're just the same. What did Jesus do? He told the people to move the stone. He was going to raise the dead, but you moved the stone. And I think in a very real way, the book of Judges is telling us that God teamed up with them as long as they teamed up with him. And so why did they not defeat the chariots of iron? Joshua had told them back earlier. Joshua had said, you go take the land because you're strong enough. You can even beat the chariots. So Joshua knew they had the power. Joshua knew they could do it. But for some reason, they did not. Maybe it has to do with, one, they didn't feel that they had the ability, even though they had God on their side. They didn't trust him to pick up their weakness. Maybe that's it. Maybe they were afraid to do what they were doing because they didn't trust themselves. That's very possible. But maybe the connection is found in James chapter 2, when James said, faith without works is dead. Could it be that the people of God said, we know God can do this, but then they just sat back and let him do it? And he's not going to do that. So I don't think there's an issue of contradiction of Scripture here. I simply think that God is showing that if you do your part, I'll do my part. Faith without works is dead. I think that helps to answer the concept of these chariots. Now, here's the other question that came in that has a connection, I think, of sorts. Someone asked, is there free will in heaven? Is there free will in heaven? Well, one of the reasons this comes up, of course, Revelation chapter 12, verses 7 through 9, is the account, as we believe, as I think is true, that Satan rebelled against God in heaven and God cast him out with the angels that were with him. There is no doubt but that Satan was a created being. He did not have eternity from the beginning, when there was no beginning. Only God has eternity. Satan was a created angel. And therefore, we might think in our heads, well, he was right there with God in heaven, and he rebelled, and therefore, maybe in heaven, when we get there, we too will have the free will to rebel. I was talking with Mark the other night. We were talking about that question a little bit on creation and the days of creation. I think it is fascinating. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And at the end of that creation moment or time, the evening and the morning were the first day. Light was created in day one. But you know what else was created in day one? Time. Time. So what was happening in verses 1 and 2? God created the heavens and the earth. And there was no form to the earth. And it was dark everywhere. Was time passing? I would suggest there was no time then, potentially. No time. So, question is, when then did Satan fall? Well, I don't know. Was he created as a part of the creation, Genesis 1:1? Or was he created when time began, starting verse 3? Well, let's think about this for a minute. What is free will? Free will says, here's an option, and there's an option. Free will is a choice between options. Galatians chapter 5. Paul said, "I say then, walk in the Spirit, you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. For the flesh lusts against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh, and these are contrary to one another, so that you do not do the things that you wish." Let me make this proposition to you. Free will exists because there is the flesh and the Spirit that are at war with each other. If the Spirit has his way, then the flesh is set aside. If the flesh has its way, the Spirit is set aside. So what caused Satan to fall? Could it be that Satan rebelled because of a temptation of the flesh? What I mean is did Satan's fall happen because God created a physical place and there was a draw in some way to that place, either for his own power or his own benefit? What do we see happening? The first appearance is he tempts Adam and Eve to sin. There is some way in which, as a spirit being, he was noticed the fleshly being, and for some reason was drawn to that. So what happens when we get to heaven? It's all over. Nothing fleshly will exist. Everything that is gone. There is no way at that point for the Spirit to lust against the flesh, because material things won't exist. And the Spirit will only have and want what is available, and that is eternity. And so the Spirit is not going to have any other option, nor want any other option. I've also included John 14 in this in past, answering the question. Jesus said, "I'm going to prepare a place for you." If the Spirit gets its prepared place that fits him perfectly, what is there to long for? What is there missing? What is there that would draw to some other place? And I would suggest nothing. And therefore, I don't think there is free will in heaven, because free will won't exist since there's nothing to make a choice about. The Spirit, that time, will then have everything that it wants. When God put eternity in the hearts of men, Ecclesiastes 3:9-11, immediately there began to be the tension between the flesh and the spirit. But it's going to be gone. And every single person, Aaron and I were talking about this the other day. One of my, I think, most powerful argumentation for the existence of God is the moral argument. And the moral argument says, every single person who has ever lived has the concept that something is right and something is wrong. Not identifying the specific things that are right and wrong, but the idea that something is right and something is wrong. Where does that idea come from? The rest of creation doesn't have it. Animals don't have a right and a wrong. It's all just as it is. So the moral argument indicts people who, as proclaimed atheists, ever say something is wrong. Wait a minute. How do you say that? How do you identify that? How do you know? And therefore, I think it very likely the case that in heaven, since there's nothing else to draw us away, the Spirit has everything the Spirit wants. It may be, shall I say, experienced individually, differently in some way. Your spirit, my spirit. But it won't be that there's something better that the Spirit will be longing for, because the place is prepared and it's set and it fits, and the Spirit will not want to be anywhere else. Well, here is what I think the connection between these two questions is. When I work with God, God works with me. And the problem that I have in life every day is that I'm fighting against God, flesh and spirit. It's a reminder every day to just keep fighting, every day to stay in the battle, every day to turn down this, to accept this. And that's what life is all about. So maybe, for me anyway, that helps me feel better about those questions, and I hope it helps you to some degree as well. So tonight, if you're ready to be right with the Lord, if you need help fighting that battle between the flesh and the spirit, that's why we come together. That's why we're here. That's what we offer to each other. If you need us to pray for you, we're ready to do it. Let's stand and sing together.
We hope that you enjoyed today's broadcast, brought to you by the Richmond Church of Christ. We are located at 1500 Lancaster Road in Richmond, Kentucky. We meet at 9 a.m. each Sunday morning for Bible class, followed by our morning worship service held at 10 a.m. Our Sunday evening service is held at 6 p.m. Our midweek Bible study is held on Wednesday at 7 p.m. We have Bible classes available for all ages on Sunday mornings and Wednesday evenings. If you are in the area, we would love to have you as our honored guest. If you're looking for a home church, we would love to make you part of our family here in Richmond. We hope this has been a blessing to you and pray that you have been strengthened and encouraged. Have a blessed day.